This is Chief Guard of the Republic Radio Show with your co-hosts Mike Tooman and Paul Burvitt every Saturday noon to 1, WRMN 1410 AM, the Fox River Valley Media Network, streaming on WRMN1410.com. Studio number here is 847-931-1410, or you could text us at the New Mexico number 505-926-1410. That's for text comments, or you can hit us up in the comments on the Facebook YouTube live channel, WRMN 1410's YouTube live channel, where we're streaming right now. How you doing, Paul?
Good. How are you? I'm
doing okay. I was researching some more about artificial intelligence, and I got scared for a second.
So did I.
The one thing is, like, I just read that artificial intelligence, some of the programs there have already passed the bar exam and already passed the medical boards.
Yeah, I found out about a year ago that they gave the bar exam to an artificial intelligence system, and it got 94%, which is really kind of frightening.
Yeah, I'd hate to be the 6% that it would have to defend that it would lose on.
Right. It all reminds me, though, about a fantastic film from the 1970s called Colossus, the Forbin Project, if you've ever seen it. And it's kind of a cult classic. It's where the United States had progressed to a point where they had a very fast computer system that was going to defend us against the Russian attack. And the computer figured out that there was a system in Russia called the Guardian. And it wanted to communicate, and everybody thought, this is a great idea. Let's let the computers communicate, and there'll be less of a chance of war. Well, as soon as they communicated, they started talking to each other. They created, through AI, their own language, and they actually took over the world. They ordered governments to kill people, and when they tried turning the power off, the systems killed innocent civilians. So, they've known about this kind of danger for over 50 years, and we have it now, and it's right in our lap.
Yeah, I think the computers that flipped the artificial intelligence. It's one thing to dream that up with the human mind in like the Colossus and everything, but to have where the it's a human programming thing that causes the artificial intelligence to do that. It's not the computers themselves. Much like when we had the big crashes with the stock market, when these companies started putting in, listen, their algorithms, if a certain stock dropped below a certain level, sell. And some stocks started dropping below, and all of them started selling, like massively, and they crashed the market. They had to shut everything off. They just shut it off, and it's like, oops. They crashed their own market thinking, oh, they were going to make money because they were going to prevent themselves from losing too much money. But what they did is they actually crashed the market more, and it had an effect. And it had an effect on other stocks because massive sell-off, everyone started selling off everything. And there's where the human factor isn't thinking up the secondary and tertiary effects of what they think is a good idea.
Correct.
But the main thing that gets me here is remember that Minority Report movie with Tom Cruise.
Right.
And what's interesting in that is they were using psychics, right? Psychic human beings to predict a future. Yeah, predict the future. And they would just use their psychic abilities to look into the future and say, oh, this guy's going to commit a crime in the future unless he's stopped. But all around you was the artificial intelligence, the real threat. They're talking about these three psychic people being a giant threat to everything. But the real threat was, like, Tom Cruise had to have his eyeballs replaced. Okay, spoilers for anyone that hasn't seen it. I mean, the movie's been out for, 25 years or something, right? Spoilers, he has his eyeballs replaced so the eyeball scanners can't read who he is and sell him a bunch of stuff because they're like reading everyone. Every time you walk anywhere with a camera, all of a sudden it hits you with a sales thing, why don't you buy this? Or this is perfect for you. And all that data is available, and it pretty much describes you. You're absolutely targeted now. And one of the things, me and the girlfriend got over a cold. And a shout out to my girlfriend, Diane. Hi, Diane, if she's listening.
Hi, Diane.
Yeah. And I went to Walgreens, and of course, I bought some cold medications. And next thing I know, 2 days later, I'm getting inundated with cold information on my Facebook feed, on my YouTube feeds, and everything. It's like I'm just getting slammed with this stuff. A bunch of emails are coming in. I'm like, oh, okay. Because it was off my credit card receipt. That even my credit card company is selling this data and this information for people to target me. But when thinking about the Minority Report there and how they're using these psychics to stop crimes, and these people have not yet committed a crime, but they're arresting them and they're putting them in prison or whatever for crimes they may have committed, may commit in the future, right? And now, when I was a detective, I think I was a pretty good detective because I could check databases. I had military intelligence training for analysis and everything. And one of the most complicated cases we had out there was stranger danger against children, because children, you know, they don't know what to describe or how to describe or something. So I would get one of these cases, and you had to investigate it. You just wanted to suspend it because there wasn't enough information, because this guy's a danger. You know, you want to get him off the street. But I had a list of crimes that may or may not have been committed by a stranger danger child predator, right? And I would run those crimes in the area, in a close by area, because most of these guys, they don't leave within 2 miles of their house. And so I would run the area there, and I would narrow it down to, you know, a few people that were named offenders or maybe had even been arrested for something in the past on that. And then I would run them deeper, right? And then I could take them and put them into a lineup and see if the person could pick them out. So I'm using the data there, the big data, all right? Because and using that for the lineup to get the probable cause to bring the guy in. Even though if I hadn't run all that, there'd be nothing saying this guy was even involved. And I did get a hit on that once. I got a real good hit on it. And the mother of the kid called me up and told me go pound sand. She was a gangbanger and she didn't cooperate with the police. So I really got this guy. I'm like, this guy's a predator. I could get him and everything. And she's like, nope. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, it's not on me. It's on her then. But
Yeah.
But when I was thinking more was with all this data out there and with the artificial intelligence, and really artificial intelligence is just a way to sort through all this data. Right? We're getting inundated. We've got all sorts of data out there, but how do you make use of it? You know, you could have all the gold in the world stacked up, but if no one wants it, it's useless, right?
Correct.
If no one wants it for something. So you could have all this data stacked up, but if you can't find use for it, it's pretty useless. So you take this, for me, right, I'll pretty much get bored after a half an hour or so looking through this and give up. I'm like, whoop. But a computer is not going to get bored. They're going to search for one thing very quickly, billions of times. And they're going to pull significant data from a big giant pile of data that any human being or group of humans, even a massive group of humans sifting through this stuff, couldn't come up with. And then it's how that data is used. So I was discussing earlier, it's like, what if you took artificial intelligence and you pumped in all the data and you say, what are the common demographics of a serial killer? Right? The most common demographics of any group, any serial killer. So you take all the data of all the serial killers that have ever been known, and you pump it in, and all the data that you know about them, and then you have the computer sift through it and say, what are the top 10 demographics? All right? Maybe it says, oh, the person's around 5'7", male, white, or, right-handed and stuff. Pretty common stuff, right? pretty common stuff. But now, all of a sudden, they're saying, well, anyone that has these same demographics is possibly a serial killer. That's the difference between artificial intelligence and human intelligence. It's like artificial intelligence to say you have a good chance of being a serial killer, where human beings said, no. That's pretty rare, even though, because these are very common demographics that match. Do you agree with that?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, so if you get to the point of artificial intelligence where you said, well, why did you lock that guy up? Well, because according to artificial intelligence, these are the top 10 demographic identifiers for a serial killer, and he had all top 10 of them. Well, did he do anything that it would have you look at a serial killer? Yeah, he had the top 10 demographics. So, and trust me, I've argued with people that have that exact circular logic. You know, to them it's circular logic. It's perfect sense. But to me, I'm like, well, do you have evidence, like blood evidence, or was he in the same area as at the same time when three different people were killed? Was he in that area? And see, that's where I get with the misuse of this. But
I remember one of the last cases I did when I was working for the state. They had an interesting case where it was a group of burglars, you know, and the funny thing was the main ringleader, allegedly, he had narcolepsy, and when he got excited, he would fall asleep at the burglary location. So he had to have guys with him, but they were really more like the ringleaders. He was like kind of like the guy that kept them all in line or whatever. And they were trying to like work out deals with these guys. Well, how they found them was the cell phone information, because what they had tracked, the common denominator was this cell phone was either at or turned off near where these burglary locations were. And then they figured out they picked the weakest link, or what they initially thought was the weakest link in the chain. And they talked to him, and they got him to go to the grand jury. And of course, you know, he himself was, you know, he made himself look more rosier than maybe the other guy and the narcoleptic guy. But it was kind of funny. And at that time, it was through the trace of the cell phone. And what was interesting was, you know, there was a question of what we were going to do. And I was saying, you know, because one of their jobs had been done down in Bloomington, I said, we could try him in Bloomington for everything, because it was the burglary spree happened in one day, and we didn't have to try him in this county or that county. We could have brought it all down in Bloomington if we wanted to, because it was all part of the series. But it was interesting because it was based on tracing the cell phone information.
Yeah, now here's the key with that, right? All right, so did you get the probable cause to arrest them based on tracing cell phone information, or did you get probable cause to get the cell phone information after one of them had been under scrutiny for burglaries, for those burglaries?
It was a little bit better than that. There was a stakeout crew, and they kind of knew where they were going to be, so they had different, and they caught him on the scene.
All right, so they caught him on the scene, and then they dumped the cell towers based on the fact that they caught him on the scene.
They traced them. Well, we already had a warrant for the cell phone information, so we already knew kind of what was going on. So we just were, it's like kind of like you predictive reasoning on a bank robbery. You have different stakeout teams at different locations where you know they might hit, and then you luck out, you catch them there at the time, you know, when they're doing it, and then that's where you put two and two together and get the other information. But yeah, we had, you know, they were trying, this was before the cases came down, and they were trying to just use the cell phone information. I told them, no, I said, we have to get a subpoena, and then we have to get a warrant, and we have to put a tracker on the cars. So, you know, I mean, and that was a hassle, because the trackers have to be reinstituted like every so many days, and then you have to go in and tell them, but we did it the right way, because I was federally, they didn't allegedly need a search warrant, but I said we're going. The feds kind of brought it to us, and I said I know you don't, but we do, so we went ahead and got the search warrant to place the tracker and everything and do it right. But yeah, it could be a problem, and but like you're saying, it's one of the tools. If done correctly, you can really make a good case with that.
Yeah, the thing is, when it's done incorrectly, like shortcuts. So with all the cell data out there, and remember when Snowden came out with all this stuff with the NSA and everything. So if you make a phone call, I like the television shows and the movies where they have the crazy person with the yarn wall with all these strings attached, going here, going there, and everything, and articles and pictures of people. And that's called a link matrix diagram. And that is one of the best Intel analyst tools out there. So when you see it, it's like there's a purpose. It's not just a crazy person. There's a purpose. But if you have a cell phone, right, that they're looking at, right, just they decide that we have a lot of information that John Doe is a big-time drug dealer. He not just a little street dealer. He's like distributing stuff. He's a crime lord, and they get a warrant to dump his cell phone, right? And now, what they start doing is they start linking up everyone else that he calls or calls him, and now all of a sudden that person's cell phone is linked, and they jump on that, and then you're like a 40-second link out that accidentally dialed one of these people, and bam, they're looking at you. And because that call is linked there, they're going to try to use that for a warrant to search, to explode your phone. And then if they've done that, right, here's the scary thing. Are we in commercial? No. Here's the scary thing. Once they do that, they're going to want to prove you're dirty. So rather than prove you're clean, right, they're going to go out and prove you're dirty. And that's what scares me, is because who is squeaky clean? Who is absolutely squeaky clean? And not everyone, So
I always used to say, if you give me enough time, I can prove that you were involved in the Kennedy assassination one way or another, even if you weren't born at that time.
Yeah.
Enough time and enough money, and I could do it.
Yep. And I lost Paul on the feed here.
Yeah, I can see your excellent promo photo. Here we are. We're back.
Yeah, we've got to get you added on to the promo photo there, Paul.
Oh, don't worry.
Yeah, so you're right. When used correctly, big data, artificial intelligence, and everything is a good tool. But when used incorrectly by people who truly do not understand it, right? They just say, hey, I got this, therefore I have a crime. It's like, no, you got this, so there's like a probability that you have a crime. It's not a big one. And I was in one of my novels, I Married a Bot Madam, which talks a little bit about artificial intelligence and everything. The girl that writes the program, she writes the operating system, which turns into an artificial intelligence powerhouse, right? And one of the things she tells it is like, I only need a 90% solution. If you get a 90% solution, come back to me with the 90% solution. Because if she lets it go for a 100% solution, it will never find a 100% solution. There's too many variables out there. So it'll just keep working and working and working. And the mathematical thing on this is that, let's say you tell artificial intelligence we want a 99% solution. But then it gets a 99% solution to the 99% solution. And it says that's good enough. But then it goes down further, and it keeps going down until it comes back with a solution that says it's 99% solution, but it's only a 12% solution because it's been diluted so many times. And you're like, oh, this is 99%, but it's actually 12. But if you don't understand that, if you don't understand the mathematics behind it, if you don't control the computer on that, if you ain't got that control over the data and everything, there's going to be a bunch of false positives. Yeah. I think with all those false positives and everything, that's why I'm not too worried about artificial intelligence doing me in. I'm worried about people who don't understand how it works, that it's not intelligence, it's just sifted through a database and selecting variables. Well, if they don't understand that and they take that as gospel and they try to prosecute you based on that, that's what scares me.
That's true.
Yeah. And so, anyone, we've got 3 more minutes here, but I'd really like to hear people about their artificial intelligence horror stories or nightmares that you're having, because one of the big things I like on this that I'd like to do on this show is to dissolve, not to increase people's fear, but to calm them down.
There is actually something that I could talk about too,
Sure.
which is the artificial intelligence with images.
Yes.
And how scarily real they're getting. Now, of course, you can usually tell a little bit of a difference with the hands. They don't always get the hands right, but I find that kind of fascinating. And
yeah, I've been watching a lot of these. To that point, I've been watching a lot of these movies with space people, and it's always these female astronauts going to the moon or whatever. And it's really kind of funny that you mentioned that, because they don't have the hands right. A lot of times they put gloves on them, but there's one out there on YouTube where a hand appears next to a head, and you don't know why it's there or where it came from, but everything else is spot on. And it's really wild because they're walking on Mars, and they've got a helmet on, but they're in a bikini and no pressure suit. So, but they look real as all get out.
Yeah, that's where you could tell. That's the main thing, is like, that's where the computer says, okay, this is what I need, but the computer didn't realize it needed a pressure suit on the people. So you're like,
Right.
okay, that's a fake. Why? Because the person would be frozen to death, or it would be expanded from the lack of pressure. It'd be overpressure and the body would pop. But the computer didn't understand that at that time. It doesn't have all the human variables in there that the human beings know most instinctively, just from existing for so long, and yeah, you're in space, you don't got the pressure shoot out and you're going to pop, But, the computer goes in there and says, well, Superman didn't pop, therefore there's a human that could do it, but he's not a human. But, it just goes off on that. Yeah, so the deep, what they call the deep fakes. And a lot of people are using that as a defense thing. They get caught red-handed. That's an actual photograph, right? That's actually there. And they go, oh, that's a deep fake. Okay. And I guess the only way you could prove that is that if you would have protected metadata on that photo. Like, here's the GPS coordinate where that picture was taken. Here's the time where it was taken. As opposed to, we made a GPS coordinate and a time, and I could prove that person wasn't there. Therefore, it's a deep fake. All right, we'll see you back in a few minutes. Chief Guard of the Republic Radio Show. And when we left, we were talking about artificial intelligence, and we got into deep fakes. Deep fakes is interesting, again, because you can falsify evidence against someone. Because a lot of people are visual. Would you say that the juries are very visual, Paul?
Oh, absolutely.
So if you show them a photograph of someone supposedly committing a crime or at the scene of a crime, or nearby, they're going to take that a lot more than maybe even eyewitness testimony. So eyewitness testimony is kind of like, remember the movie My Cousin Vinny, right? Where he just tears apart the eyewitnesses, how you saw.
To that end, I always talk about this, and it was a movie that I first saw when I was about 12 years old. And when I saw this movie, I realized I knew I wanted to be a lawyer. There's a famous Dana Andrews movie called Boomerang. and actually it's about destroying witnesses. And it was sadly it was an Episcopalian or something like that priest was murdered, and they focused on one guy, a veteran who had mental issues, and there was pressure for days on finding this guy, and they found him. Yeah, that's terrific. That's the best movie you could ever watch. And what happens is Dana Andrews is the state's attorney, and he actually even pressures the police, who is Carl Malden, to find the guy. They find the guy.
Streets of San Francisco.
Yeah, but this is pre that, when he was a big time character actor, okay, and the head of the Screen Actors Guild at one time too. And they pressure the police, and they get this guy, and they bring him up for charges. And you know what? Dana Andrews realizes that the guy couldn't have done it, and he tries to drop the charges, and the judge won't let him. And he goes through and does a preliminary hearing, and he literally destroys his own witnesses, because he shows, woman said she saw him and there was a line of steam in this thing in the diner, and it couldn't have been him. And then he even goes so far as to take the gun, put live ammunition in it, and have one of his guys try to shoot him in the courtroom, and there was a fault in the firing pin, and he proved that he didn't do it. And that's what the difference is between relying on what's brought to you and told, and not checking it out for yourself no matter what.
Yeah, and it's scary because in our justice system, you're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. Then when it gets to the point where you have to prove your innocence because you're assumed guilty, or the court has got you guilty, or there's pressure to find you guilty, right? So all of a sudden you got this deep fake out there, and you're like, I was never there. You know you were never there, but where's your proof, right? Where's your proof of this? But they got a deep fake showing you were there, and everyone's looking at it, and they already, you're under arrest. You're a criminal, so obviously you're a liar, right?
Right.
So the jury's looking at that. You don't know if you want to take the crapshoot with the judge either, right? Because you don't know what pressure he's under, as we've seen a lot of politically active judges. All right. So
worried about his reelection is more like it.
So how to defend yourself against that? Well, one, you could thank your phone, because the metadata there, right, can prove that you're not there. All right. You could have a lawyer that knows enough to check the metadata on that stuff. That's going back. I don't know if I'm not going to talk about that, but the FBI are super geniuses. I won't talk about how or when or anything, but a lot of times they had problems with the metadata, and then when they were trying to basically entrap someone, the person would catch the metadata on their stuff and say, how come this picture was taken at the FBI headquarters? It's like, there's the GPS right there, dude. So you can check that stuff. And some of these deep fakes will come out there and they'll say, hey, here's, we got a picture of you nude or somewhere. And they do a pretty deep fake, and you're like, yeah, well, we'll release it, and the metadata's wrong, never there. So just the picture and everything. What is it? One of the things they used to check for when they checked people's computers. This just came up because I'm not going to mention a name, but a certain lieutenant on the Chicago Police Department was suspended for a year, and then he actually retired on account of he was using a city computer to look at stuff he wasn't supposed to. And he had problems with his computer, so he called in the computer guys. And the first thing the computers guys do, is they run this search. And it doesn't search. The only thing it searches for is exact file sizes. All right? It doesn't search for what you call the thing like the JPEG or the bitmap.
JPEG, yeah.
All right. It doesn't search for the file type. It just searches for a file size. because these very common pictures had a certain file size on them. And then they pull up the file size, and then they pull up the thing, and they go, oh, there it is. Hey, let's take the caller.
Hi there. Welcome to the show.
Yeah. Cleveland Dennis calling. Fascinated by the show right now.
Oh, thank you.
I have a comment or two. You asked about stories for AI.
Yes.
I'll tell you what I experience and what I know. Pretty sure I heard this correctly. The AI has been around since the 60s, actually. They looked at it back then when whomever had a computer back then, I don't know, maybe in the 70s and further, that they determined that, this ain't going to work. Now, we're moving towards modern day. I have business chillers out of China going into Canada, into the U.S., and these chillers are to cool down the electrical operations on buildings and so forth. And now you have the big boys such as Amazon and Google and whoever runs the AIs for, generating all the necessary, but they're sucking up a lot of electrical, and it's very expensive. So instead of getting the drain on the local electrical, they're building in outlying area like outside of Cleveland, Worcester, Ohio. They bought up in Canada. They bought a lot of land, and they're developing this. And it looks like, it's going to be big time with like I say, the big boys, however you want to name them, Amazon, Google, and so forth. But I use AI on my phone to do a lot of fast conversions of, say, size of cargo for aircraft, size of equipment going into ocean containers. Comes out great, converts it faster than I can sit down and write it out or punch it into a calculator which was the old method. Now, the experience I had is recently we have an agent network worldwide that we've been involved with for 25 years. They come to us and they want pricing. We used to have to sit down and check with the carriers, get the rates, bump it up for our margin, and quote them back. All of a sudden, from around the world, we had such, an increase in activity. And I told my people on the East Coast, I said, I'm not doing these. I said, first of all, agent business is not easy because they want to nick you every time they find a flaw or something, and you end up with peanuts potentially. Anyhow, the point is there's such a volume of requests from overseas for quotes, and I told my corporate, I said, I'm not going to be doing these. He said, well, just send them here. So I sent them to the East Coast. They got one guy that's doing all these, and all of a sudden, he's doing a lot. I send him 5 or 10 a day, and I go, hey, Bill, how do you do all this? And he laughed. He called me up. He goes, they wrote me an AI program. I go, you would depend on the AI program to quote these agents, tens of thousands of dollars to move their goods from, say, anywhere USA to into Europe anywhere, into South America, into Africa, into the Far East? And he goes, yeah. I said, you get any shipments yet? No.
Yeah. Well,
and it's just a fascinating scenario to me.
Yeah. So something with that, with the early stages of computer language translation, and being a linguist from the, 2-time graduate of the Defense Language Institute, Czech and Russian, my brain doesn't work very linguist-like. I wish it did. My son's a little better. But the original web-based web translation programs would just go out, like you would put in a phrase like the quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog, right? The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog, and you would want to translate that into Russian, right?
Yeah, how now, brown cow? Go ahead. I'm
But it wouldn't actually translate word for word. It would go and find a web page that was in both Russian and English, all right? And it would look for that phrase, the quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog, and it would find the same position in the paragraph or whatever on the web page, and it would return that Russian from the web page to you, all right? Or it would find something close enough. So it's just going through a bunch. It's not actually doing the work of translating. It's just going through a bunch of that stuff. And when you come to something like all the complications versus gasoline, the weight of the material, the type of material, the taxes on the material, tariffs on the material, everything like that, rather than do all those calculations, it's going and it's looking for a like quote, and then it's returning that information. Like the AI, when you do a search on Google and everything, and the first thing that comes up is that AI thing, right? And that's just Google finding that, an answer somewhere on its own web pages. It's not artificial intelligence. It just searched it out and says, well, AI put this together because it saw it 10 times, so therefore it figured because it saw it a whole 10 times, it must be the truth. You just
educated me. Sorry to interrupt, but I got to tell you, all of a sudden one day on my phone, it's not Google, it's AI, and they're giving me the answers that I'm looking for.
Yeah, but it's doing the best guess. All right, it's doing the best guess, and I guess people now when they write a research paper, right, they're giving Google a topic like, how do you make a brick, right? And then Google comes out with this AI thing. This is what it found on how to make a brick. And then they just copy and paste that into their paper because they figure it's not copyrighted because it was artificial intelligence that wrote it, but they didn't really write it. So now the teachers have to go back, right? They have to go back, and they gotta take that thing and type it into AI, right? And then AI says, how do you make a brick? Right.
This is fascinating. You just educated me. It's fascinating, and it's all a big, conundrum. It's fascinating what you just told me about the linguistic process that you and your son experienced. But yeah, so you think those professors? So the professors are then using AI to check the facts. Is that it?
Well, yeah. In the Army, we had to write some papers, right? And they didn't want you plagiarizing anything. So they would run the paper through a web search, and it would tell you, AI would tell them what percentage of that paper was in other things, maybe it was plagiarized. And they said if you were more than 30% on this thing, that they would kick it back and make you do it over. Because you just, they figured that you kind of took someone's stuff in there.
Wow.
Right.
Relating to that, though, because I'm familiar with this a little bit too, with the college paper things through some friends of mine. You also have a problem though if it's a real common area, like of information, like and there's not a whole lot you can do about that because it's so much in the public domain. That if it's an event, there's bound to be a bunch of repeats about it because it's so much out there about that, and then they really can't determine if that is plagiarized or AI because that was written down so many times in literature or in papers or in print, so that it's become like the standard response to something.
Yeah.
Interesting. I have a comment, a little story. You mentioned plagiarism. Back when I was going to school, I was taking some broadcast journalism, and they wanted me to cover the meeting at the college of like I can't remember specifically, the board of directors or whatever. I went there and covered it, and I wrote it for the school newspaper. About 3 days later, it was in the major newspaper in Cleveland, my story, but somebody else's name.
Nice.
I know, and
Nice.
I went and took that to the teacher. He was he's a fascinating guy, and I showed it to him, and I said, you know what? I quit. I said, I can't handle this. I says, this destroyed me, for any further interest, that this would happen.
That's not very uncommon because everyone think we're talking about some patent rights back in the day, and you got someone like Edison, right? Really smart guy, but he was so smart that he realized that he wasn't the smartest guy in the room. But he was smarter than some of the smart guys in some way, especially business sense, because he had the money and he had the name, and he hired a bunch of guys, and they invented a lot of stuff for him, including Tesla, right? Including Tesla. But he, by his contracts, owned the patents. He owned the rights to that material, to their what do you call it? Their brain, the work of their brain. He owned that now. All right.
Yeah, I know the story.
So you turn it into your teacher. You turn in your article. You're your teacher, and teacher said, "Hey, this is pretty good." Obviously, he's a journalist teacher, so he has friends in journalism. So he sends it to one of his friends in journalism that just publishes it under his name because, hey, this is just a student. No one's ever going to read this except And then you do read it, and you're like, "Holy cow!"
Right.
So
Yeah.
what he did, yeah.
Yeah, I read the paper every day. There, like I used to read it here, but can't at $5 for the Sun Times or the Tribune. I'm not paying that anymore. So I get the junk that comes across the internet or whatever I hear on the radio.
Yeah.
Or TV. I don't watch TV news because I don't know, it seems cockamamie at times. But no, fascinating discussion. What you're
thank you, Dennis.
Here. Yeah. By the way. I used to cover God's Green Acre in the Midwest and out of Cleveland and here in Chicago, but Marlin, Ohio is where Edison was from. And it's just outside of Sandusky, and he used to always look around for stuff in that town because he was born there, but I guess he never did anything there and ended up on the East Coast in New Jersey and so forth. But that's all I got, guys. I'm listening, and again, it's a fascinating program.
The interesting thing is it's because of Edison that we had the electric chair, because he was pushing direct current and Tesla was pushing alternating current, and Edison wanted to show how alternating current was unsafe and it could kill you. And then that's exactly how come we got the electric chair, because direct current didn't have enough juice to do anything. So that's an offshoot of something that Edison actually helped pursue, even though he didn't invent it.
Yeah. So,
well, okay, I have a comment about electricity. Where I grew up, the houses were old enough, they had old wiring, and boy, did it melt the wax in my ears at times, because it's not like today where you have the service box with the progress of not having fuses, and the fuses were kind of crappy, but anyhow, yeah, you learn a lot about electricity and how many people died back when they were playing with it in the early 1900s.
Just remember, the one way to kill artificial intelligence and to keep the computers and the machines from taking us over is just kill the electricity.
Well,
when was the last time you saw a computer that ran directly on coal?
Good point. I got stories about coal. That's for another time.
Yeah. Glenn Campbell used to have a real good story. He said they were so poor in his day, they had no electricity. They had to watch television by candlelight.
Like that one, yeah. I get it. Well, or if in the early 50s you'd have to buy a magnifying sheet to put over the television to enhance it, make it bigger.
Yep.
Or a colored sheet to get it in color. Anyhow.
Yep, I remember those.
Yeah, right.
They sold them at Woolworths.
Yeah. And they could probably sell them on the internet today.
Yep.
Yep. Well,
okay, again, fascinating program, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I got. Yeah.
Okay, so Paul, next week we're going to talk about the freshwater Navy, right?
Yep. That's really cool. and also about the ancillary things to it. I was up in Glenview yesterday, and it was fascinating.
Yeah, they got a museum up there, right?
Yeah, but the airplane's actually in a Highline retail store, Van Mauer. I put it on the YouTube. It's fascinating. I went with my friend and his wife and my girlfriend, and I put it out on YouTube. It's fascinating. It's one of the few things left, and it's so sad because that's a great part of American history.
Yeah, I flew out of Glenview Naval Air Base a couple times.
Yeah,
it's
beautiful.
Yeah, we actually landed some C-141s there because we flew them down. We put all of our equipment on these 141s and flew it down to Bragg, and then came back, 2 weeks later and came off at Glenview. Yeah, but then they shut that down. So
yeah, that's sad.
Well, the closest thing, and then they shut down O'Hare Military, and like the closest thing to get to now is you have to go all the way up to Milwaukee.
Yeah,
so they got the National Guard base, the Air National Guard base up in Milwaukee. Of course, we got Air National Guard down in Midway too.
Yeah,
but not as convenient as Glenview was.
Right.
And all right, so
2 minutes.
We got a few minutes left. I hope everyone enjoys.
I wanted to talk about a scenario that's kind of scary, though, and I got this. So say you're wanting to sell something on Facebook or whatever, and you take a picture of it. Say you want to sell like a table, and behind it is a picture of your grandpa or your uncle or something, and in the picture, say he was a World War II veteran, and he brought back a German Luger, and he put a stock on it, and that's in the picture. And your grandpa has been dead for 50 years now, but you put that on Facebook, your table or whatever, and it's a picture of him. And then a few years later, say you did this in the early part of the 2010s, and you took that off of the internet, but another company had bought all those images and they still have it. So then say now you want to, because this was in a law review article, it's an example. Say now you want to sell that table, and you take the picture of it, and the picture that you thought was off the internet that you took off, still out there. And say the local police department has a program looking for images of people and also contraband. And that traces back to you, and then they come to your house because that old image is still there, and they don't even need a warrant because they got all that stuff.
No, they need a warrant to come into your house.
Well, no, but they can come to your house. And
but you don't have to let them in.
Yeah, you got trouble.
Yeah, you got trouble, but if you live in such a peaceful area that the police have time to do that, that's when, I want to move there.
Right.
All right, see you next week.
See you